Welcome to Pankinen Financial Perspective with Ashton Pankinen from Pankinen Financial Group. Planning for your financial future means navigating challenges like market volatility, inflation, and retirement income. Pankinen Financial Perspective is here to help by addressing common financial concerns, sharing valuable strategies, and exploring ways you can work toward your financial goals. Now let's get started with Pankinen Financial Perspective.
Hello and welcome to Pankinen Financial Perspective. My name is Ashton Pankinen from Pankinen Financial Group. If you'd like more information about what you hear during our show today, give us a call at 952-873-2703 or visit us online at pankinenfinancial.com. That's PANKONIN financial.com. And while at my website, click on the radio page to check out past shows and to subscribe to our program on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or Amazon Music. Also, while at my page, click the link at the top to get the latest retirement guide. Today, we're talking about something that sounds like a good problem to have, a windfall. Maybe it's an inheritance, a bigger bonus than expected at work, a settlement, or even a lucky night at the tables. Whatever the source, a sudden influx of cash is exciting, but it's also something that must be handled very carefully. During the show, we'll be highlighting a U.S. News and World Report article headlined, 9 Ways to Spend a Windfall Wisely. But before we go any further, let me introduce my co-host, Tony Shore, whose appearance on the show it always feels like a windfall to me.
You've always got something funny to say in the introduction about me. I love it. I don't know about that, but thank you, Ashton, and you're too kind. I'm thinking about windfalls, and I'm like, okay, I don't play the lottery. I don't think I'm up to inherit any money. My relatives, I wish I had a rich relative that I could inherit from, but I don't. So I'm like, I think the way I'm going to end up with a large sum of cash is to be a winner on a contestant on the Wheel of Fortune. I think that's all I've got going for me. My wife says I should go because we watch the Wheel every night. Just like, but windfalls, this is exciting because a lot of people are inheriting money. They say it's the greatest, we're entering into the greatest wealth transfer in history, I've heard. Yeah. All the baby boomers leaving all that money to their kids, and it is the greatest wealth transfer in the history of the world. So a lot of people are going to be coming into money, and boy, they can make expensive mistakes. And I think most people assume, I would know what to do if a big check landed in my lap or when I get an inheritance. Right?
You'd hope so, but the instinct doesn't always serve people well here.
Yeah. So if a windfall showed up for me tomorrow, where should my head go first?
Well, the first step really isn't financial at all. It's that emotional side. And we often talk on the show how money is emotional. You might think you'd feel nothing but thrilled if a lot of money fell into your lap, but some negative emotions can actually creep in as well. Yeah.
Well, negative emotions over getting money?
Yeah, interestingly enough, it's not about the money itself. It's the first thing is kind of worth paying attention to is how you're feeling about it. People assume a windfall only brings good feelings, but it's not always true.
Well, what bad feelings could possibly come from getting money?
And there's actually some more bad feelings than you'd expect from it. In my own experience as a financial advisor who works with clients through these kinds of change, often there's something kind of interesting, which people have maybe had a tight budget for years and sometimes find a sudden windfall brings more anxiety than actual relief like it should. There's just a fear of getting it wrong, and that fear can definitely spiral.
Yeah, I think that probably sounds surprising to people, but I get it.
Yeah, it can cause people trouble sleeping, feeling anxious or maybe guilty about that windfall or where it came from. Just feeling like you don't belong in this new financial reality. It can all kind of be signs of what the article calls sudden wealth syndrome. It's described as an emotional strain that can follow an unexpected financial windfall.
So what does that strain actually lead people to do then?
Yeah, there's a few things I generally recommend to avoid. First is just splurging on those things that lose value the second you buy them, going out and buying that boat or, whatever it might be.
New car.
New car is a common one. Next is just handing the money to family and friends far beyond what's sustainable. And finally, then there's chasing risky investments just to feel like you want the money to do something.
Yeah. So how does somebody keep that from happening, Ashton?
Well, you just got to start by being honest with yourself and your headspace. If you're spinning, it's kind of fair to put the big financial calls on hold and to talk to someone like a financial advisor. And, I always joke that I'm a financial therapist, and part of my job is therapist, but it actually might involve a real therapist depending on, how those emotions are affecting you.
Well, and especially if you're inheriting after a loss. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously there's a lot of emotions there. Is there a way to know that if what you're feeling is just normal or something more serious?
Yeah, the test is whether it's clouding your judgment. Feeling a little nervous is going to be normal. Losing sleep, feeling weighed down by guilt, or just making moves just to quiet that anxiety is a different story. And that's the point where, some outside support may help.
Yeah. And that's honestly reassuring. Now, what's the next thing somebody should be thinking about if they inherit some money?
Yeah, so holding off on that big ticket spending. There's an Empower survey. What would Americans do with a windfall from June of this year, which is highlighted in the article? And that found that 31% of Americans who'd receive or expect a windfall said they'd spend some of it on things like travel, about personal indulgences. And then 12% said they'd go straight for a major purchase like a vehicle. Meanwhile, 65% of the respondents said that they'd save or invest some of the money. And then 52% reported some of their windfall would be earmarked for paying off current debt they have.
Yeah. Some of that sounds like the fun part of getting a windfall, though.
Yeah, it can be eventually. But the smarter move is kind of stepping back and looking at your whole financial picture before any of that spending happens. Maybe write down some of those dream purchases that you have, the sports car, the trip overseas, whatever it is, and just let that list sit for a while, kind of mull it over. And we talk about this not just when you get an inheritance, but anytime you have a big purchase as well.
Yeah, anytime you're making a big purchase. It's not off the table forever necessarily. It's just you don't want to do it right away. You want to give it time before you make that decision.
Yeah, Tony, I think that's a good way to put it. The article explains that a year or a minimum 6 months tends to be a better window for people to recommend for just letting that initial excitement kind of settle in before making those bigger purchases that maybe you'd come back to regret later on. And so it's worth revisiting that list every so often. Some things stay just as appealing and others lose their shine once that initial rush kind of wears off.
Yeah, I bet. So you're holding off on spending. You're sitting with your emotions. What do you do with the news itself of this windfall?
Yeah, that's our third point. And, it's about being a little selective on who you actually tell. There's a strong pull to tell everyone the second it happens, but keeping it quiet, at least early on, tends to serve people better. And so this isn't the moment for a social media post or a group text to that extended family.
Yeah, I'm telling you, Ashton, there are only two people. If I came into money or had a windfall or inheritance of probably $5,000 or more on up, whether it's $1 million or $5,000, I'm only telling two people about it.
Yeah,
my wife and my financial advisor, right?
That's good.
I mean, really, Ashton and my wife, those are the two people I'm telling. So just because I think that's smart, at least for a while.
Yeah.
But people tell all the time when they get money, they start telling people about it, right?
Yeah, they do. And it can definitely backfire. The article also talks about a 2026 survey from Vegas Insider that found that 4 in 10 U.S. adults said they'd keep the lottery winnings entirely under wraps. And close to half that said they'd only tell a small handful of people. So again, broadcasting that news too widely can invite requests for money from people you barely know, or even attract advisors with less than honest intentions.
Yeah, and I think people say that going in, but then they end up telling people.
Yeah, for sure.
So who actually makes the cut? I already said who I would tell.
Yeah. Again, usually it's that spouse or partner.
You better tell your spouse or partner.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that's important.
For sure. Maybe a small circle of close friends. And, again, whatever professionals are helping you manage money and affairs. Maybe that's attorney, a CPA, obviously financial advisor as well. A simple gut check is kind of what you want to hand someone before that windfall comes in. Perspective probably shouldn't shift just because you have more of it now. Again, make sure you're communicating that for there.
Yeah, I mean, if you wouldn't have given somebody a bunch of cash before the windfall, just because you have more money now doesn't mean you should after that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So what comes next?
Yeah, bringing that professional help. There's another survey done by Empower that found that only 1 in 5 Americans said they'd actually consult a financial professional after
Oh,
receiving a windfall. And that's a huge gap that can be expensive fast for
oh,
anyone who
yeah.
not already well versed in investing and money management. It's one thing if you've been investing for a long time, you come into this windfall, more than likely you're still going to bring in your advisor. But a lot of times it's people that maybe don't have any experience investing at all that end up inheriting some of this money.
Well, yeah, and that's a problem because that's why you read the stats. I think lottery winners, no matter how much
Yeah,
they win, no matter what the amount, whether it's 10 million, 1 million, 10 million, 50,000, they're usually broke and bankrupt within 2 or 3 years.
yeah,
And that's just, you gotta, if you want to keep the money and make it grow for you, you gotta work with a financial advisor if you get
yeah.
a windfall. And I think a lot of people just assume, oh, I'll learn as I go, right?
Yeah, and some try, and getting truly uncomfortable with this stuff can or truly comfortable with this stuff can take a long time, sometimes longer than people expect. In the meantime, working with someone experienced tends to pay for itself. I just read a couple of studies, one anywhere from the value of a financial advisor is between 3 and 5%.
Yeah.
That's net, meaning after expenses that's involved there. And between the tax rules and the sheer number of financial decisions involved, a second set of eyes can help prevent some very expensive missteps.
Sure. So what should somebody be looking for in that kind of financial professional or advisor?
Yeah, you want someone who's going to look at that whole picture, not just a piece of it. In many cases, it may be beneficial to have a team that consists of a financial professional, a tax professional, and an attorney. I had a client come in the other day, and they met with another advisor, and I'm like, "Did he go through any of these questions with you?" And they're like, "No, he just asked how much money I had to invest, and didn't really get the full financial picture." And so again, it's important to find someone that's going to take a look at that entire picture. Tax strategy, investment choices, insurance coverage, and estate planning should all be a part of the conversation, just not a handheld in isolation of, oh, how much do you have to invest?
Oh, yeah. Taxes always play a role.
For sure.
And you
It's one of the
got to
largest
look at that.
expenses.
Yeah, they're going to play a big role. So I think you have to have that tax strategy. So what's next?
Yeah, tackling that high interest debt, no matter how large that windfall is, it's hard. It's hard to call yourself financially free while carrying some of that high interest debt. According to the article, credit cards, personal loans, and student loans usually deserve that first attention.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I'd guess paying off debt isn't exactly the exciting part, though, of getting a windfall. But I think that's probably something you should look at right away.
Yeah, and it's usually not the most exciting thing, but it tends to be the wisest move available. Clearing that debt means the interest charges and the monthly bills disappear right along with it, kind of which lifts some weight off the people that you maybe been carrying for a long time, can improve your cash flow, and again, get rid of those interest payments. Usually the high interest stuff can be in that 20-30% for credit cards. So it's important just to get that paid off and make sure you get yourself into don't get in that position again either with those credit cards.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's good debt and bad debt. What about a mortgage?
Yeah, that's where, it can get a little more nuanced here. Plenty of financial advisors would tell you not to rush into paying off that mortgage, especially if it's a low interest rate, since money invested elsewhere could reasonably outgrow what that mortgage interest is getting or charging you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you have to look at it. A car loan is different, as you mentioned.
That's kind of a similar idea. Paying off a car can feel great emotionally, but there's a pattern where people who don't end up, and they end up just shopping for that second car sooner than they would have otherwise because they've got that debt paid off. And again, depending on the interest rate there. And so until there's real clarity on a bigger plan for the money, it might be worth waiting to do that one as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's huge. And the message isn't necessarily to wipe out every debt immediately then.
Yeah, you got it. Debt that's expensive and offers nothing in return, like those credit cards, deserves that quick attention. Debt that's cheap and long-term, like a mortgage, is worth a real conversation with an advisor before just assuming it has to go.
Yeah. And speaking of that, we've been talking about the importance of working with an advisor if
Yeah.
you get a windfall. So let's take a minute here to let our listeners out there know how they can get a hold of you to set up a no charge, no obligation consultation.
Yeah, if anything from today's conversation has you curious or concerned, give us a call, 952-873-2703. Again, that number is 952-873-2703. Visit our website, pankoninfinancial.com. That's PANKONIN financial.com to set up a complimentary consultation. We'd welcome the chance to look at your full situation with you.
Yeah, there you go. Well, what's next on the list?
Another thing that's common that we recommend here is beefing up your emergency fund. Cash reserve for the unexpected is one of the most valuable things someone can have. And without it, people often end up leaning on credit cards or loans when life throws a curveball at them.
Yeah. Well, and life always throws a curveball, doesn't it? It
seems like it.
It seems like that. But I think a windfall could be a perfect opportunity to build up that emergency fund or cash reserve. I never thought of that aspect, and probably a lot of people aren't thinking about that if they come into a chunk of money.
Yeah, and if that cushion doesn't already exist, putting some of the windfall towards starting one is the smart move. The right amount really comes down to someone's monthly costs and how much financial peace of mind they're after.
Yeah. How can somebody put themselves in a position to better hit that target number?
Yeah, so we talk about maybe adding up those essentials, essential expenses, I guess, housing, transportation, groceries, utilities, medical costs, and then decide how many months coverage would help you sleep at night. So most people, it's somewhere between that 3 to 6 months of expenses, and that number tends to climb the more people are depending on that income for that.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's huge. So what's the next piece here?
Let's start thinking a little further down the road. One of the smartest things you can do with a windfall is to put it to work for you through investing, whether that's toward a house, a kid's education, or catching up on retirement savings that maybe you fell behind on.
Yeah. Well, does the size of the windfall really change the approach much?
Yeah, it definitely can. A few $1,000s is nice, but it's not usually enough to change someone's financial trajectory in a big way. Getting to the range of the tens of thousands or more, though, and that could generally shift someone's lifestyle, maybe even move up that retirement guideline if it's managed well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's obviously if it's $100 million versus $5,000,
sure.
There's different things you're going to do.
Yeah.
But you want to take advantage of that growth. Give us an example of that kind of growth.
Yeah. So for illustrative purposes only, let's just look at a 30-year-old who makes a one-time lump sum investment of $100,000, lets all the dividends reinvest, and then makes no additional contributions or withdrawals over the next 30 years. Let's assume a growth portfolio, 10% rate of return. That investment could grow to nearly $1.75 million by the age of 60. And so again, while those returns are never guaranteed and actual results are going to vary, it's a powerful example of how compounding can reward those long-term investors, versus taking that $100,000 and going to buy a new pickup or something like that. And if you use some of that money to fund your Roth IRA as well, a lot of that 1.75 million is going to be tax-free as well.
Wow. Well, and that's a striking jump, the difference that can make.
Yeah, it really is, and it makes the case for that restraint early pretty clear. The hardest part usually isn't the math. It's the resisting the urge to touch the money while it's growing.
Yeah. Well, and I think it takes real discipline, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. But whatever the amount you're working with, a financial advisor can help you figure out which investment vehicles truly fit your goals. Again, maybe we can peel off some for that short-term gratification, if you want to call it that, and then for some longer-term goals.
Yeah. Well, and I think this has been a great conversation so far today. What do you have for us next?
Well, we talk about this a lot on the show, the tax side of things and thinking about, what tax consequences have there, and maybe even giving back makes sense. It's a big one because IRS doesn't treat every kind of windfall the same way. And a lot of people are caught off guard when their check is smaller than they expected after taxes are taken out. And so again, this is where having a tax professional or a financial team can be really important. A lot of times we do typically work with your tax preparer and CPA to make sure we're all on the same page there.
Oh, for sure. And break it down a bit. right?
Yeah. I can break it down, but again, keep in mind, I'm not a tax professional. I play
You're
one
not
on
a
TV.
CPA. Yeah, you play one on TV. You do a lot of future tax planning as part of the
Yeah,
overall retirement and investment plans, but you're not a CPA. Okay.
correct. So things like severance pay, work bonuses, gambling winnings, and cash you happen to find or recover are typically taxed as income. Tax laws are complex and depend on your own personal circumstances. So again, we always want to consult with your tax professional to make sure we're on the same page for that guidance.
So, what generally falls on the other side of that line?
Yeah, a cash gift usually isn't taxable to whoever receives that. An inheritance typically isn't either, though any earnings of that inheritance produces after you inherit it can be taxable. Interest and dividends, rental income are generally taxed as well. Or if it's a traditional IRA that you've inherited, there's going to be some tax consequences there.
What about a life insurance payout? Some of our listeners may come into money that way. They're a beneficiary of life insurance.
Yeah, that one's a little bit more of a gray zone. The death benefit is usually untaxed. But again, that interest that may accumulate on the payout or proceeds tied to a policy that is sold or transferred can be taxable.
Okay. And I bet there are other examples where it really depends, right?
Yeah, a couple come to mind. Personal injury settlements are one. Compensation for physical injury typically is untaxed, but punitive damages, interest in any portion tied to lost wages are usually taxable. And so again, we want to make sure we clarify this with the tax professional. Disability back pay works similarly. Supplemental Social Security income benefits generally are not taxable, while Social Security disability insurance benefits may be taxable depending on the recipient's overall income. So that money received as part of a divorce property settlement is also generally not considered taxable income. We actually deal quite a bit with the quadro is what we call it, qualified domestic relations order, where some investments are split in a divorce, like a 401k plan. And again, that's typically not taxable, but for the spouse getting those, this may be their first experience with investing, and so it's important to get some advice on that as well.
Yeah. What about an everyday tax refund? What if somebody gets a big tax refund?
Yeah, that's typically not taxed with one wrinkle. If someone itemized in a prior year and got a benefit from those deductions, a refund tied to that year could actually be a portion of that taxable.
Of course. That's crazy, but that's, and it's all of this you've been talking about can be a lot to keep track of, right?
Yeah, it is. And, it's exactly why this is the piece worth handing to a tax professional, financial service professional, rather than just guessing. Windfall doesn't end up being taxable. If it doesn't become taxable, giving you cause to care is one legitimate way to soften that bill, is to donate to a cause that you care about.
Oh, yeah. And how meaningful is that benefit, right?
Yeah, it's more than people think. Someone taking the standard deduction can still write off a cash gift to charity up to a set dollar amount, depending on the filing status. And then someone who itemizes can generally deduct cash donations to a healthy share of their adjusted gross income. And just beyond that tax angle, it's also a genuine chance to put money behind something that matters to you personally, can help with that emotional side of it as well.
Yeah, and I know that you and Pankin Financial like to give back to the community as well, and it not only is it a good feeling, but it's great to really be able to give back like that, and that's a nice way to wrap up that piece. What's the final point you have for us on how to manage a windfall here?
Yeah, getting organized and then giving yourself permission to actually enjoy it. I know we talk a lot about this, to have that guilt-free spending. Whether that money comes from an inheritance, a settlement, a lucky streak at the tables, gambling or lottery winnings, whatever that is. A short mental checklist does help. Check in with yourself emotionally first. Keep the nose close to the vest. Sit on a big purchase for a while. Knock out that costly debt. Build up a safety net. Make sure you bring a financial advisor in, and then just get a handle on that tax side and let your actual goals, not impulses, drive how the rest gets used.
Yeah. So, you talked about all of those things. Emotions, all the way to, letting things set for a while. And once somebody's worked through all of that, what happens?
Yeah, that's when it's worth pulling that wish list back out, see what's still worth buying. and what we could generally bring the most joy to you. It doesn't need anyone else's approval as long as it's meaningful to you and the money's actually there for it. And that's where you get that green light to actually enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. So let's recap again. I think this is a great list and things for people to remember, because a lot of our listeners out there who may not have had big chunks of money before are going to have them. So check in emotionally. Mm-hmm. Don't make any big purchases or financial decisions right away. Sit on those big purchases. Be careful about who you tell. I think that's a big one. Yeah. Bring in a financial advisor, a professional like yourself, who's going to look at the big picture, a financial team. And Ashton, I know you have that team for folks. Yeah. Clearing out your costly debt. That was a big one. Use the money to build an emergency fund. I think that's probably the one that gets overlooked here the most. A lot of people wouldn't even think of that. I didn't think of that. I'm glad you brought that up. If I come into money, I got to make sure my emergency fund is adequate, and then invest for the long haul. Really make sure that money is growing and working for you. Take advantage of the compounding interest. And you talked about understanding the tax picture. That gets complicated. And then lastly, you mentioned get organized before enjoying the money. I think if you do all those things, you're going to save a lot, because people can make a lot of expensive mistakes here, right?
For sure. Yeah, they can. You know, and I know you want to make sure you slow down. It can feel like a windfall demands an answer right away. But almost none of this actually has to happen day one. You know, working through the emotional side, including that privacy, debt, savings, and taxes, first tends to lead somewhere much better than acting on impulse ever does.
Yeah. And so let's bring it back around. I mean, obviously, the one thing you said, if somebody takes away, slow down. And I say, check in with your emotions first.
Yeah.
Again, sit on those big purchases. Be selective about who you tell, and bring in a financial advisor. That's huge. I just think all of this is so important.
Yeah, and that's the list. And if there's one thread running through every point, it's patience. Handled thoughtfully, and a windfall can genuinely change someone's financial path. Handled on impulse, it tends to just slip away.
Yep, exactly. That's a great note to end on today. We're out of time. Like my mom always said, patience is a virtue for which I can hardly wait. So great show, Ashton. Before we go, let our listeners know how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, if you're expecting that inheritance or you've come into a windfall, give our office a call at 952-873-2703. Again, that number is 952-873-2703. Visit us online at pankininfinancial.com. That's PANKONIN financial.com.
All right, and that does it for today's episode of the Pankinin Financial Perspective with our host, Ashton Pankin.
Thank you for joining us for Pankinin Financial Perspective. Don't head into retirement without a plan for both your finances and your health. For more information, contact Ashton Pankinin at Pankinin Financial Group at 952-873-2703 or visit pankininfinancialgroup.com. Join us again soon for another episode of Pankinin Financial Perspective. Advisory services are offered by Ashton Pankinin LLC DBA Pankinin Financial Group, an investment advisor in the state of Minnesota.
All matters discussed during the show are for informational purposes only. Each individual situation may vary, and the opinions expressed here may not apply to everyone. Materials presented are believed to be from reliable sources, and no representations can be made as to its accuracy. All ideas and information should be discussed in detail with one of our qualified representatives prior to implementation. We are not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration, the Federal Medicare Program, or any other government agency. Calling this number will direct you to a licensed sales agent.